Hi everybody, it's me again, Randy Ray at The Literate Texan, and this is number 7 in a series of videos where I take you on a tour of my bookshelves. So this is the 7th one. Usually I've got probably 15 or 20 books per shelf, so these kind of go quick. Sometimes they kind of go slow. Sometimes it depends on whether or not it's a book I've already read and whether or not I have much to say about it. As it turns out, I have lots of books on my shelves that I haven't read yet. So I'm going to dig into these and tell you what I have. And we're going to start right here with this beautiful edition of The Beautiful and the Damned by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This is published by Scribner's. In 1913, when Anthony Patch was 25, 2 years were already gone since irony, the Holy Ghost of this later day, had theoretically at least descended upon him. That doesn't tell you much about the plot at all, does it? Well, this is the story of Anthony Patch and his wife, Gloria. Harvard-educated Patch idles through his days, waiting to receive his inheritance. His reckless marriage to the beautiful Gloria is fueled by alcohol and destroyed by greed. The Patches race through a series of fiascos, first in hilarity, then in despair. A devastating portrait of the nouveau rich, New York nightlife, wild ambition, and squandered talent. The Beautiful and Damned was published in 1922 on the heels of Fitzgerald's first novel, This Side of Paradise. It signaled his maturity as a storyteller and confirms his brilliance as a novelist. Well, I've read This Side of Paradise and I've read The Great Gatsby. Those are the only two F. Scott Fitzgerald novels that I've read. I did not care for This Side of Paradise, but I love The Great Gatsby. I reread The Great Gatsby every year. It's one of my favorite novels. I don't know how much I'm going to like The Beautiful and the Damned or not, but it looks like a big, thick, juicy one. There's at least 470 pages here, so it's pretty thick. Don't know when I'll get to it, but I will get to it. The emphasis on these particular shelves, by the way, seems to be on fairly classic books. I've heard some people call this The Brick. It's Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. This is a Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition, and it's just lovely. Anyway, as you can see, it's very thick. It's almost as thick as my face here. How many pages does this thing clock in at? 1,400 pages, I think. So I started this one and did not finish it, but it's not a DNF because I have every intention of going back and finishing it. But what I did read of it, I absolutely loved. I don't know why I put it down. I don't know. If you've watched very many of these videos from me, you know that I'll say this a lot. I just got distracted by something shiny, you know. But I fully intend to go back and read this all the way through. If it's as good as everyone says it is, and I have no reason to believe that it's not, then I'll probably be one of the ones that go on my, to reread annually shelf. So, here's a copy of For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway, also published by Scribner's. This is, I picked this up for $1.50, by the way. That's a great price. Yeah, but this was published in 1960. Well, it was originally published in 1940, but this particular one was published and printed in 1968. So, love Hemingway. Never made any secret out of the fact that I love Hemingway. It's a nice, fat 504 pages, it looks like. And no dust jacket. That's probably why I got it for $1.50, though. Anyway, looking forward to digging into that. I've got another Penguin classic here. This is by G.K. Chesterton, The Man Who Was Thursday. We dig deeper and we blow you higher. We wish to deny all those arbitrary distinctions of vice and virtue, honor and treachery, upon which mere rebels base themselves. The Central Anarchist Council is a secret society sworn to destroy the world. Oh, I like this already. The council is governed by 7 men who hide their identities behind the names of the days of the week, hence the Man Who Was Thursday. Yet one of their number, Thursday, is not the revolutionary he claims to be, but a Scotland Yard detective. And the question soon becomes, who and what are the others? G.K. Chesterton unravels this unique fantasy in his own inventive and exuberant way and uses this nightmare of paradox and surprise to probe the mysteries of human behavior and belief. So, that looks interesting. If I'm not mistaken, G.K. Chesterton, well, I am mistaken about that. Forget I even started that sentence because where it was going was no place good. I've got this novel here. This is a Signet classic rather than a Penguin classic. This is a Signet classic of Sinclair Lewis's novel, It Can't Happen Here. It's one of Sinclair Lewis's later novels to match the power of Main Street Babbitt and Aerosmith. A cautionary tale about the fragility of democracy, it is an alarming, eerily timeless look at how fascism could take hold in America. This was published a long time ago. It wasn't published last month about Donald Trump. Written during the Great Depression, when the country was largely oblivious to Hitler's aggression, it juxtaposes sharp political satire with the chillingly realistic rise of a president who becomes a dictator to save the nation from welfare cheats, sex, crime, and a liberal press. Called A Message to Thinking Americans by the Springfield Republican when it was published in 1935, It Can't Happen Here is a shockingly prescient novel that remains as fresh and contemporary as today's news. Wow. Excuse me for drinking on air. I'm on some medications that give me a dry mouth. Anyway, wow, 1935 that was written. Oh, we got another one by Sinclair Lewis here, and this is Babbitt. Okay, and this one's a little bit more of a valuable addition here. Babbitt is the story of a man, his family, and his one great friendship. George F. Babbitt is a hustling, prosperous real estate broker in a city of about 350,000 people. Back of his business and clubs and 100% activities is a wistful wonder as to what this business of living is all about. In this novel are ourselves, our homes, our cities, and the people we know best, but something surprising and dramatic happens to George Babbitt, and that's the story. Babbitt is a searching, dignified, and important picture of American life today, and the publishers here believe it is better, even better, than Main Street. So this was recommended to me by David Littman, who was one of the founders of a company called Hotels.com, where I worked in my 20s and mid-30s. And I'd asked David for, he's a well-read man, brilliantly intelligent, but also broad-ranging in his thinking, too. He wasn't just a business genius. The guy knows a lot about life. David's still with us. I send him an email every year to wish him a happy birthday. But this was one of the first books that he ever recommended to me. He recommended this to me probably in 1997, 1998, and I still haven't read it. Sorry, Dave. I'm going to get to it soon, though, I promise. It actually sounds really good, too, So, okay, I've got this beautiful edition here of The Face and the Frost, a story by John Belair. And as you can see, the slip, it's got the dust jacket, but it's all tore up. So, The Face and the Frost is one that I found through a recommendation in Appendix N of the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons rulebook. Yeah, I'm that kind of nerd. I used to play Dungeons and Dragons, and back in the day, they had an appendix with suggested reading that inspired the stories there. And one of the interesting things about The Face and the Frost is it's about two wizards. And let's see here. Several centuries or so ago, in a country whose name doesn't matter, there was a tall, skinny, straggly bearded old wizard named Prospero, and not the one you're thinking of either. Prospero lived in the South Kingdom in a ridiculous doodad-covered house filled with the paraphernalia of a practicing sorcerer. Alcohol burners, jars of mandrake root, reference books like Nameless Horrors and What We Do About Them, Byzantine copes, alembics, the de rigueur skull, of course, and a sarcastic magic mirror given to taking liberties and singing loud off-key songs. He's hero number one. Hero number two is Roger Bacon, Prospero's longtime friend and learned necromancer, asked to leave England after conjuring a magic wall that utterly failed to hold back the Vikings. In the frosty North Kingdom lived the wizard Melicus. Many years ago, Melicus and Prospero had served their apprenticeship together, but now Melicus has become the familiar of powers and principalities better left unnamed. He, of course, is the villain. The story begins in Prospero's home when he and Roger Bacon are reunited after a long separation. The two old friends should have been enjoying themselves, but actually they were both scared silly. Outside, inside, seeping all around them in the weird, wailing night was a presence as cold itself. The wizards tried chant after chant in corrupt Coptic, but nothing did any good. The thing was closing in. Call it fantasy, parody, allegory, a fable a la Tolkien, a supernatural thriller, a gothic comedy. The Face and the Frost defies labels. It follows the two wizards as they penetrate the North Kingdom, pursuing the source of the evil that threatens them. It is so frightening, Mr. Bellairs can turn as grisly a phrase as Edgar Allan Poe. And so funny that it gives one the odd sensation of raising a belly laugh while standing the hair on end. The author has rewritten the age-old story of good versus evil with enough shuddery charms to enthrall any young or adult reader. Mr. Bellairs is not only good at this sort of thing, he's downright spellbinding. See what he did there? I love that. This is actually a fantastic book, and I have read it, and I'm planning to reread it. So, and actually very much looking forward to rereading that one. So. And then to continue, I've mentioned in the last few videos that I actually have some reading projects going on, a la, Criminale has reading projects going on, Michael K. Vaughan has reading projects going on. I don't really talk about my reading projects as much, but I'm starting to. One of my reading projects is to read more of my favorite author, or to read everything by one of my favorite authors. John Steinbeck, who was a favorite of my 8th grade English teacher. Mrs. Haston, thank you for introducing me to John Steinbeck, because he has provided me with hours and hours of entertainment. This is a copy of Mice and Men, of course. Very, very short. Doesn't take any time at all to read. 98 pages, maybe. John Steinbeck, The Pastures of Heaven. This is a Penguin Classics edition. I believe these are all Penguin's Classics edition except for the of Mice and Men. In 12 interrelated, this is a story collection, 12 interrelated stories set in a fertile California valley, John Steinbeck portrays the human failings and frailties, illusion and pretensions that undermine the rich promise of, quote, the pastures of heaven. So this looks like a really good one, and this is one that I have not read before and don't really know much about. It's one of his earliest books, too. It's first published in the fall of 1932. I believe Mice and Men came out in 1936 or 37, so it predates it by about 5 years there. John Steinbeck, Cup of Gold, A Life of Sir Henry Morgan, Buccaneer, and occasional reference to history. Okay, so this was like a twofer, because we did Spring into Adventure earlier this year, which, of course, pirate stuff almost always counts for that. From the mid-1650s through the 1660s, Henry Morgan, a pirate and outlaw of legendary viciousness, ruled the Spanish Main. He ravaged the coasts of Cuba and America, striking terror wherever he went. Morgan was obsessive. He had two driving ambitions: to possess the beautiful woman called La Santa Roja and to conquer Panama, the Cup of Gold. Steinbeck's first novel and sole work of historical fiction, Cup of Gold, is edgy and adventurous, brash and distrustful of society, and sure to add new dimension to readers' perception of this all-American writer. Sole work of historical fiction, I'm not sure, but I think The Grapes of Wrath might qualify as historical fiction. Although I guess at the time it was written, it wouldn't be historical fiction because it was going on. It was a current event novel at the time. It was just a novel. And then John Steinbeck, To a God Unknown. You notice these all look pretty similar. I love these Penguin classics. This is Steinbeck's ambitious second novel, exploring man's relationship to nature and to destiny. Ancient pagan beliefs, the great Greek epics, and the Bible all inform this extraordinary novel, which occupied Steinbeck for more than 5 difficult years. That's a long time for a 182-page novel. While fulfilling his dead father's dream of creating a prosperous farm in California, Joseph Wayne comes to believe that a magnificent tree on the farm embodies his father's spirit. His brothers and their families share in Joseph's prosperity, and the farm flourishes, until one brother, frightened by Joseph's pagan belief, kills the tree, allowing disease and famine to descend on the farm. Set in familiar Steinbeck country, To a God Unknown is a mystical tale exploring one man's attempt to control the forces of nature and ultimately to understand the ways of God and the forces of the unconscious within. Man, even the back covers of these Steinbeck novels sound great. I can't wait to read this one. And then, so I think this is an extra copy of To a God Unknown. I've got 2 copies here. See? When I picked it up, it looked awfully familiar, and that's why, because it was familiar. So, all right. Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. This is the Norton Critical Edition. I love Norton Critical Editions. Norton Critical Editions always come with the work in question. I bought this one used, of course. But also, it's got sections about background and context, essays about the 19th century and their attitudes towards race at the time. Most of these include contemporary reviews, but the text of The Heart of Darkness isn't very long at all. It's only about 75 pages or so. The Heart of Darkness was the inspiration for, or the basis for, Apocalypse Now. Yeah, Apocalypse Now, the Francis Ford Coppola movie. So, but of course, the setting is different. I believe Heart of Darkness is set in Africa and concerns colonialism in Africa, whereas Apocalypse Now transplants that to Vietnam. All right. So far, I've if you've noticed, I haven't read very many of these. I think out of all of them, I've only read 2 or 3, of Mice and Men being one of them. Of Mice and Men is the gift that keeps on giving too, because I don't care how many times I read it, it still has that powerful emotional effect on me. This is another Norton Critical Edition. This is Middlemarch by George Eliot. One of these greatest novel of all time kind of things. But this includes a preface and detailed explanatory annotations by Bert G. Hornback, the 1874 edition of the novel, which was last corrected by George Eliot. There's also a selection of Eliot's letters, journals, and essays, and other fictional works informing her ideas on life and art. 5 contemporary reviews of the novel, 11 critical essays on Middlemarch's central themes, and a chronology and selected bibliography. And this doesn't look like a very thick book, okay, from the outside. You notice, but look how small that font is, man. There is not a lot of white space on here. So I have a feeling that Middlemarch is going to be, it's going to be a read. I mean, it's going to be something to sink my teeth into. Not as in its drudgery or anything like that, but more in terms of, it's dense. There's a lot to this. So I've never heard anybody say anything bad about Middlemarch, although I don't know much about it. Toni Morrison, Home. I have read this. I'm going to read this again. When Frank Mooney joined the army to escape his too small world, he left behind his cherished and fragile little sister, C. After the war, his shattered life has no purpose until he hears that C is in danger. Frank is a modern Odysseus returning to a 1950s America mined with lethal pitfalls for an unwary black man. As he journeys to his native Georgia in search of C, it becomes clear that their troubles began well before their wartime separation. Together, they return to their rural hometown of Lotus, where buried secrets are unearthed and where Frank learns at last what it means to be a man, what it takes to heal, and above all, what it means to come home. You can't go wrong with Toni Morrison. I don't know how many Toni Morrison books I've read at this point, but I've yet to pick one up and read one that I didn't come away from it thinking, God, that was just fantastic. And, okay, so speaking of the brick, Les Miserables earlier, that's not the only brick I've got on this shelf. The other brick I've got on this shelf is by Leo Tolstoy, War and Peace. And not too long ago, I mentioned my friend Kirby wanting to do some reading with me. I think we're doing a buddy read of True Grit right now, in fact. But she read War and Peace last summer and has gone on and ranted and raved about how wonderful it is. Kirby's an intelligent, thoughtful reader. If she thinks War and Peace is wonderful, then it almost certainly is. And this one's another massive tome of a book. It's like 1,400 pages here. And this is, again, one of these special Penguin Classic Deluxe editions. So, but not a lot of white space on here either. The font's not super, super tiny. It's kind of average, but yeah, these paragraphs are dense and stuff. So I don't know. I look forward to digging into this. I understand there was a group not too long ago that did it as a big group buddy read. I missed out on that for whatever reason. Don't know why. But, it's on the list, baby. It's on the list. I can't die while I still have books on my to be read list. That's my working theory, okay? So I also have a novel here by John Fowles called The French Lieutenant's Woman. A splendid, lucid, profoundly satisfying work of art, a book which I went almost immediately to read again. That's from the review in the New Statesman. Charles Smithson, a respectable, engaged man, meets Sarah Woodruff as she stands on the cob at Lyme Regis, staring out to sea. Charles falls in love, but Sarah is a disgraced woman, and their romance will defy all the stifling conventions of the Victorian age. Widely acclaimed since its first publication, The French Lieutenant's Woman is a profoundly inventive and satisfying novel by a master storyteller. Been meaning to get to this for quite some time now. Mentioned how much I admire Ernest Hemingway earlier. This is a collection of the Nick Adams stories. And let's see here. They show a memorable character growing from child to adolescent to soldier, veteran, writer, and parent. A sequence closely paralleling the events of Hemingway's own life. But as Philip Young writes in the preface, Hemingway naturally intended his stories to be understood and enjoyed without regard for such consideration, as they have been for a long time. Ernest Hemingway did more to change the style of English prose than any other writer in the 20th century, and for his efforts he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1954. Hemingway wrote in short, declarative sentences and was known for his tough, terse prose. Really looking forward to digging into this. This was going to be one of my choices for Spring into Adventure this spring, but I just didn't get it. I just didn't get to it. There were so many choices for Spring into Adventure that I just didn't get to all of them. I've got a whole stack of them set up for next year, in fact. All right, another Penguin Classic edition, Jane Austen, Emma. Jane Austen's another one of those people who's written like half a dozen novels total. So, it's reasonably easy to read her entire oeuvre, as they say in France. Her masterpiece, mixing the sparkle of her early books with a deep sensibility. Robert McCrum, The Observer. Although described by Jane Austen as a character whom no one but myself will much like, the irrepressible Emma Woodhouse is one of her most beloved heroines. I love the word irrepressible. Clever, rich, and beautiful, she sees no need for marriage, but loves interfering in the romantic lives of others, until her matchmaking plans unravel with consequences that she never expected. Jane Austen's novel of youthful exuberance and gradual self-knowledge is a brilliant, sparkling, comic masterpiece. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one too. And much to Steve Donahue's chagrin, I've read nothing by Jane Austen yet. This will be my first Jane Austen. Although I do have an edition, I showed it off the other night, of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. But it's part cookbook. It's got a bunch of recipes for cookies and stuff in it. So that if I ever the urge to read literature while I'm baking cookies, I guess I could do both at the same time. So, and every time I've shown this on screen in the past, people have raved in the comments about how wonderful The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas is. And so I'm really looking forward to digging into this one. It's another giant book. It looks like it's almost 1,100 pages. But yeah, I think most people are familiar with the Count of Monte Cristo and what it's all about and stuff. So anyway, that is bookshelf tour number 7 wrapped up. Oh, wait, there's more. Okay, just to demonstrate, I forgot about these over here. I put them in multiple stacks now. Okay, so they all fell on the floor. All right, guess what? They're going to get moved into bookshelf tour video number 8. But they were junk science fiction novels that somehow got into the middle of the stack of classic literature, but they all fell on the floor just now, so I'm not going to bother showing those. And I'll see you in my next video. Until then, do your best to stay hydrated. It's still summertime out there, and stay sexy, folks.